Hi, this is Mrs. Homer, and today we're going to talk about active and passive transport. As a reminder, the cell membrane is what's going to control how things move in and out of a cell. And so it's going to be very essential in active and passive transport. And it's comprised of phospholipids in a bilayer, as well as proteins, those are the green blobs, and other things like cholesterol and carbohydrates. Now, when we talk about cell transport, it's really important that you understand what concentration is. So concentration is the amount of solute dissolved in the solution. And usually the solute is represented by dots in our picture. So let's talk about active and passive transport. First of all, when I talk about this, I'd like to think about my kids and sled riding. So when we go down the hill, if I were to take my kids sled riding, they love it. They're happy, they're smiling because it's fun and it's easy and requires absolutely no energy on their part. However, when we go up the hill, they're complaining, they're whining, they want to quit sled riding because it's not so fun and it requires energy. This is very similar to active and passive transport. When we deal with passive transport, it's really easy because we're going to go from an area that's high to an area that is low. And so it requires absolutely no energy. We say it's going down the gradient, just like going down a slide or going down a hill. But when we do active transport, it's hard work. It requires energy. And so we have to go from a low spot to a high spot, just like climbing up a sled riding hill. It requires energy to go from low concentration to high concentration. And that is the biggest difference between active and passive transport. Passive, you go from high to low, and active, you go from low to high. And so you can see here in the diagram, we're looking at the solutions and we're going from high to low for passive, and from active, we're going from low to high. And that is the number one thing you need to remember. Now, let's talk about passive transport. There are three different types of passive transport. And the first one is diffusion. Now, normally diffusion is just going from high to low concentration, and this is natural. Things just naturally spread out, just like in this image, or when someone sprays way too much perfume in the hallway, it just spreads out and it goes everywhere in the hallway or in the room. Now, in terms of the cell and cell transport, diffusion happens when we go from high to low, but we're doing so through the cell membrane. So you can see here we're going from high to low, but we're going right through the cell membrane. So those phospholipids, they're not stopping us. We're just squeezing on through. You can see that in the GIF down here below as well, that it is just going from high to low. Now, this is going to be things like carbon dioxide as well as oxygen, and they're going to be transported through diffusion. And that happens in your lungs. It's really important that we go from high to low because we're exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide in the lungs so that we can keep in the oxygen and send it to our cells and get rid of the carbon dioxide. Another type of passive transport that requires no energy is facilitated diffusion. And facilitated diffusion is just like diffusion, except the particles are too large to actually fit through that cell membrane. So they can't fit through that phospholipid bilayer. So instead, in facilitated diffusion, we go from high to low, but we do so through some type of protein that's helping us out. It still requires no energy. It still is passive transport. It just is using a protein. If you look at this image comparing facilitated diffusion with regular diffusion, the only difference you're going to notice here is that there's a protein in facilitated diffusion. All right, third type of passive transport is osmosis. Osmosis is still moving high to low. It's still no energy, but in osmosis, water is what's moving. And it's really important for you to understand water still moves from high water, they're the blue dots, to low water. But when water moves, it's easiest to remember that water goes where there's less solute. Sorry, where there's more solute because there's less water there. And so we're going to move over towards the higher concentration of solute simply because there's less water there. And when that happens, you can see in this image, the water level goes up in one way and down in the other to help equal out the concentration. All right, so passive transport. We have diffusion right through the membrane, facilitated diffusion using a protein, and osmosis, water. Everything going from high to low, and all of them not requiring energy. Now, this is in contrast with active transport. With active transport, we're going from low to high, and we're going to use energy. And the main type of active transport is a protein pump. We're going to go from low to high, we're going to use a protein pump, and we're going to use some type of energy. ATP energy, energy from electrons, we're going to use energy. We've seen this in the sodium-potassium pump. We've also seen this in the electron transport chain when things are pumped in from low to high for a particular reason. And so that is the only thing you really need to know about protein pumps. Low to high, and it uses energy. Finally, there is one more type of active transport that you should have looked at, endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis is when the plasma membrane helps move materials into the cell by forming a pocket and taking them in, and exocytosis is when a vesicle fuses with the membrane to let them out. All right, so one more time, active transport requires energy. That's going to be your protein pump. It's going to be your endo and exocytosis. Passive transport does not require energy. It's going to be diffusion, facilitated diffusion, or osmosis. That's all I got for today. Good luck on your air test.